My name is Michael, and I am 50 years old. For more than 15 years, I have carried a marriage with Rachel, a woman who came into my life already holding the weight of two daughters, Emma and Haley. When we first met, they were just children, wide-eyed and uncertain, yet already shaped by the absence of their father. He existed only in fragments. A card that arrived late, a rare appearance at Christmas, his voice on the phone sounding more like an obligation than affection. He was a ghost who cast shadows but never gave light. And so I became the one who stayed. I was the man in the driver's seat every morning, rising before the sun so they wouldn't miss school. I was the one who held a damp cloth to their foreheads when fever burned their small bodies. I was the signature on every permission slip, every field trip, every line where a parent's name was required. I was the wallet emptied for their clothes, their braces, their endless list of needs. I became the one who mattered, though never in the way I longed to matter. They called me Michael, never Dad. Sometimes I wondered if Rachel encouraged it, or if she feared that allowing me that title would erase their father entirely. I never pressed the issue. I told myself respect would come with time, that one day, in some unguarded moment, one of them would look at me with recognition and call me what I had earned. But that moment never came. Instead, I was tolerated, as if my presence were something they had agreed to endure, not embrace. In the beginning, I thought it was just childhood stubbornness. Children cling to blood, even if that blood abandons them. But as they grew older, the distance hardened into something sharper. Emma, the eldest, would speak to me with a polite coldness, always careful never to offer more warmth than necessary. Haley followed her sister's lead, often smirking at jokes Rachel and I never understood, their laughter carrying the unspoken message. You are outside of this. You don't belong here. Yet still I gave. I poured myself into a family that never once reached back. Every promotion I chased, every late night at the office, every dollar I tucked away was not for myself, but for them. I told myself I was building something steady, something undeniable. Even if they never called me father, I would be the foundation beneath their feet. When Emma's wedding plans began, I believed, foolishly, that the years of sacrifice were about to bear fruit. I told myself this was my chance to finally be recognized, not as a stepfather, not as a placeholder, but as the man who had raised her. The venue was expensive, but I paid. The dress, the music, the photographers, the flowers, every detail carried my name on the receipt. Rachel promised she would help, but her promises dissolved into silence, and every bill landed squarely in my lap. Still, I did not protest, because I thought, this is it. This will be the proof. I imagined Emma looking at me with tears in her eyes on that day, realizing I had been there all along, even when her father was not. I imagined Haley seeing that I was the one who made their dreams possible. I even imagined Rachel standing beside me, acknowledging that her husband had been the backbone of it all. But deep inside, there was a shadow I could not dismiss. The truth I tried to ignore was that despite the years, despite the countless sacrifices, I had never truly been allowed into the heart of their family. I was useful. I was necessary. But I was never theirs. I remember one evening, months before the wedding, when Rachel sat across from me at the kitchen table. The bills were spread out, my pen scratching across check after check, and she placed her hand on mine. "You don't have to do all this," she whispered, but her voice carried no conviction. It was the kind of protest that comes from habit, not belief. She knew I would do it because I always had, and I knew she would let me because that was the silent contract of our marriage. I provide, she avoids the burden. I wanted her to stop me, to insist we share the weight, to say that the girls should contribute or that their father should be involved. But she never did, and so I carried it alone. There were nights when I lay awake staring at the ceiling, the glow of the alarm clock burning into my eyes, and I asked myself if I was a fool. Was I building a family, or was I just financing one? Was I a father, or merely a man filling the empty spaces another left behind? I told myself not to think that way. I reminded myself of the good moments, the rare smiles, the occasional thank yous, the times when the house felt almost whole. But those moments were scraps, crumbs offered to keep me moving forward. They were never enough to silence the hunger for recognition that gnawed at me. As Emma's wedding drew closer, the expenses grew heavier, and with them, so did the silence. The girls rarely spoke to me about the wedding. They planned with Rachel, laughed with their friends, whispered about dresses and colors as if I weren't even in the room. I was the man behind the curtain, pulling levers and signing checks, while the play unfolded without me. Still, I endured, because I believed the final act would be different. I believed the day of the wedding would be my redemption. I thought Emma would walk down the aisle, see me waiting, and understand. I thought Haley would glance at me during the reception and finally see me not as a step, not as a sponsor, but as a father. I held on to that hope with everything I had. But deep down, a part of me knew the truth. Years of effort mean nothing when the heart refuses to see. It happened the night before Emma's wedding. A family dinner meant to celebrate, to gather everyone together before the ceremony, to laugh and toast and anticipate the day that was supposed to be the culmination of years of sacrifice. The restaurant was expensive, of course it was. I had booked it, paid the deposit, chosen the menu. Rachel had suggested inviting not only family but also Emma's closest friends and bridesmaids, and I had agreed, though I knew it would multiply the bill. I told myself it didn't matter. It was her night, their night, and if it cost me more than I had, I would still find a way. We sat at a long table, the kind that forces you to raise your voice just to be heard. Glasses clinked, waiters poured wine, laughter rose and fell in waves. I sat near the head of the table, beside Rachel, opposite Emma and Haley. Their friends flanked them, faces glowing, dresses already too fine for a casual dinner. For a while, I allowed myself to believe everything was fine. Rachel leaned against me, smiling, and Emma spoke about the flowers, about how beautiful the hall looked, about the music she had chosen. I nodded, listening, pretending that I was part of it all. Then came the moment. Haley had made some joke about the playlist, something about the music being old man songs. Emma laughed, her friends joined, and then Haley's voice, sharp as glass, cut across the table. "You're not really our dad, so don't pretend this is your family." The words landed like a knife, clean and merciless. And then Emma laughed too. She raised her glass and added, "Yeah, Michael's just our sponsor. Without him, we wouldn't even have this dinner." The table erupted. Laughter poured from every mouth. Their friends leaned in, some covering their faces in mock shock, others grinning wide, emboldened by the cruelty. It wasn't just a joke. It was a declaration. I sat stone-faced. My fork remained poised above my plate. For a moment I thought perhaps I had misheard. Perhaps it was just sarcasm, some twisted humor meant only for them. But no, the looks on their faces told me the truth. They were laughing at me. Rachel tried to hush them. She touched Emma's arm and whispered, "That's enough." But it was weak, half-hearted, drowned in the waves of laughter. She didn't defend me. She didn't stop them. She just hoped the moment would pass. And I understood in that instant that nothing I had given mattered. 15 years of labor, of sacrifice, of bending until I nearly broke, reduced to a punchline in front of strangers. I did not speak. I did not argue. I finished my meal in silence, every bite tasting like ash. I paid the bill, more than most men spend in a week, and drove us home with a face of stone. Rachel tried to fill the silence with nervous chatter, but I offered her nothing. When we reached home, I did not join her in bed. I walked to my office, shut the door, and sat in the dark with my laptop open before me. For a long time I simply stared at the glow of the screen, at the folders labeled with bills, accounts, receipts, the evidence of my devotion. And then I made my decision. I took back the phones I had bought for them, both Emma's and Haley's. I walked into the living room, gathered them from where they charged, and placed them on my desk. I shut off the internet, called the provider, ended the service that had kept their lives humming. I logged into the taxi app one always funded for them and removed my card. I closed the accounts that covered their streaming services, their subscriptions, their little luxuries that had flowed so easily because of me. Everything was under my name. Every luxury they enjoyed had my signature beneath it. and I saw now that years of investment meant nothing to them. There was no anger in me as I did it. No shouting, no rage. Only clarity. Cold, merciless clarity. They had told me what I was. A sponsor, not a father. Very well, then. Sponsors can withdraw their funds. As I worked, Rachel knocked softly at the door. "Michael, please talk to me," she whispered. But I did not answer. I could not bear to hear her excuses, her pleas, her half-measures. She had sat at that table and let her daughters slice me open. Her silence had been its own betrayal. By the time dawn touched the edges of the blinds, it was done. The strings had been cut. I closed the laptop, leaned back in my chair, and felt something I had not felt in years. Peace. Not joy, not triumph, but peace. I knew the storm would come. I knew that Emma would discover her vendors had not been paid in full, that Haley would reach for her phone and find it lifeless, that Rachel would realize the ground beneath her feet had vanished. But I also knew this. I had been living in illusion, and that illusion had ended the moment they left. The decision was final. That night, the man they called a sponsor disappeared, and in his place stood something they had never expected. A man who would no longer be used. Morning came, and with it, chaos. The girls had woken early, buzzing with the excitement of the day before the wedding. The air was supposed to be filled with hair appointments, last-minute fittings, phone calls to vendors, and final touches. Instead, the first scream came from Emma's room. "Mom, my phone won't turn on." Rachel rushed down the hall, her voice rising in confusion. A few seconds later, Haley added her own voice to the storm. "Mine too. What's happening? They're dead." I remained in the kitchen, pouring coffee, my movements calm, deliberate. I listened to their frantic footsteps, their panic spreading like fire. Within minutes, Emma's voice carried down the stairs again, shrill with fear. "The florist says the payment hasn't cleared. They're not delivering until it's confirmed." Rachel appeared in the doorway, her face pale. "Michael, did you forget to finalize the payments?" I didn't answer. I sipped my coffee, eyes fixed on the dark liquid as though it held more meaning than her panic ever could. Emma stormed down the stairs, phone in hand, shaking it at me like a wee *P***N. "What's going on? Why is nothing working?" "The hairstylist says the deposit bounced. The DJ's demanding another payment or he won't come tomorrow. Are you trying to ruin my wedding?" Her voice cracked with hysteria. Haley followed, her face twisted with the same fury. "This is insane. How could you let this happen now? Everything's falling apart." I placed the cup gently on the counter, met their eyes, and said nothing. They circled me like vultures, shouting, demanding, begging for explanations. Rachel tried to calm them, tried to reason, but her voice was drowned out. The girls turned on her, accusing her of being careless, of not making sure I had handled things. Their panic turned to rage, and soon they were screaming at their mother as though she had betrayed them too. For the first time in years, Rachel looked at me. Not with disappointment, not with frustration, but with something else. A question, an uncertainty, a recognition that perhaps she had never truly seen me. "Michael," she said quietly, almost pleading, "tell me you didn't do this." But I offered her only silence. By noon, the vendors had *N pulling out. The photographer emailed to say he had another booking since the contract had not been honored. The caterer left a voicemail dripping with frustration. The hall demanded final confirmation, threatening to cancel by evening if payment did not arrive. Emma collapsed on the couch, sobbing into her hands, her dream unraveling before her eyes. Haley paced the room, her voice shrill, calling everyone she knew, begging for help. Their friends whispered in the corners, glancing at me with fear, unsure what to say to the man who sat so still while everything burned. Rachel hovered between fury and desperation. She begged me in whispers, tugged at my arm, pleaded with me to reconsider. "Please, Michael, not now. Whatever this is, whatever you're doing, not on her wedding day. We can fix this later, just help them now." I looked at her, my face unreadable. "Help?" I asked, my voice low. I have helped for 15 years. And tonight, at that table, they showed me exactly what I am to them. A sponsor, not a father. If that's the truth, then let them see what life without a sponsor looks like. Her mouth opened, but no words came. She staggered back, pale, her hands trembling. For the first time, she could not defend them. By evening, the house was a war zone. Emma's voice was raw from screaming. Haley's texts had grown frantic, one after another flooding my phone, though I never replied. Rachel cried quietly in the bedroom, torn between her daughter's rage and the cold reality that her husband had finally broken. Then came the desperate turn. Emma, her eyes red, her face streaked with makeup, grabbed her phone and called him. Their father, the ghost who haunted their childhood, the man who sent the occasional card and disappeared. She called and Haley called and Rachel called. Over and over, their voices rising with each unanswered ring. But he never answered. Not once. Hours passed and still no response. The silence from him was louder than their screams. They realized too late what I had known all along. He was never coming to save them. He never had. The girls' anger turned inward. They lashed out at Rachel, accusing her of marrying the wrong man, of letting me control everything, of not preparing them for this moment. Their words cut her like knives, and she finally snapped. Enough! Rachel's voice cracked, louder than I had heard in years. She stood in the middle of the room, her hands shaking, her eyes burning with tears. Do you even realize who has been here for you? Do you understand who paid for your schools, your clothes, your lives? It wasn't your father. It wasn't me. It was him, Michael, the man you mocked last night, the man you laughed at. Without him, you would have nothing. The girls froze, stunned. Their mother had never taken my side so openly, so fiercely. For a brief moment, silence filled the room, heavy and suffocating. But then Emma turned away, her face twisted with bitterness. He's still not our dad. He'll never be. Rachel collapsed onto the couch, her strength spent. Haley muttered something under her breath and stormed upstairs. Emma followed, slamming her door with enough force to shake the walls. And I remained where I was, watching, listening, unmoved, because I had already seen the truth. When their real father abandoned them, I had stepped in. When they mocked me, I stayed. When they laughed, I paid. But now, when the foundation crumbled, they discovered what it meant to have nothing but his blood. He would not save them, and I no longer would. That night, Rachel came to me, her face streaked with tears, her voice trembling. Michael, please, don't let it end like this. I looked at her, my eyes hollow. It ended the moment they laughed. She turned away, broken. Upstairs, the girls cried themselves to sleep, the wedding collapsing around them. Downstairs, I sat in silence, the house heavy with the weight of everything unsaid. And outside, the phone never rang again. The morning of the wedding should have been filled with silk dresses, bouquets, and photographs. Instead, it began with silence, broken only by the sound of Emma's sobs echoing down the hall. The house felt hollow, stripped of celebration, as though even the walls knew that the day had already died before it began. The vendors had all withdrawn. The florist refused delivery without payment. The photographer had taken another job. The caterer canceled outright, furious over wasted time. Even the hall itself, the grand, glittering hall Emma had chosen months ago, had voided the contract when no confirmation came through. By noon, Emma's dream was ashes. In desperation, she and Haley clung to one last illusion. Their father. He had ignored their calls the night before, but hope is stubborn, even when it borders on madness. They convinced themselves he would appear, swoop in, save the day. He'll come through, Emma muttered, pacing the living room, her hands trembling. He has to. He wouldn't let this happen. But the door never opened. The phone never rang. His absence was louder than any presence could have been. When it became undeniable, the girls turned to Rachel, screaming, blaming, clawing for someone to hold responsible. Haley spat venom. You should have made him pay. You should have controlled him. Emma's voice rose above her sister's, breaking with rage. "This is your fault, Mom. You let him ruin everything." Rachel stood in the middle of the storm, broken, her face pale, her hands trembling. She looked at me, as though begging for an answer, but I remained silent. This was not my chaos anymore. This was the cost of years of illusion, the price of believing that I could buy a place in a family that never wanted me. By late afternoon, the girls tried to salvage the ruins. They called their father again, begged him to let them use his house for a small gathering, just something to save face. Against all odds, he agreed. Perhaps guilt whispered in his ear, or perhaps he wanted to appear, if only for a moment, like a man who mattered. So they rushed. They loaded dresses, decorations, whatever scraps they could gather, and drove to his house. Rachel followed, her face streaked with tears. I did not go. I remained behind, sitting in the quiet house, the ghost of laughter from that dinner still echoing in my ears. That evening, the phone rang. It was Rachel. Her voice was frantic, nearly hysterical. Neighbors had complained about the noise. Cars lined the street, blocking driveways. Someone had called the police. The attempt to host a wedding in his cramped, neglected house had collapsed within hours. Guests left in frustration, murmuring about the chaos, the embarrassment. Emma's friends drifted away, unwilling to be part of the wreckage. The wedding was over before it began. Days later, a letter arrived. I recognized Emma's handwriting on the envelope. I opened it, half expecting an apology, half expecting venom. It was venom. She wrote that I had ruined her day, that I had destroyed the most important moment of her life out of spite, that my silence, my refusal to help, was unforgivable. Not a single word of regret, not a single acknowledgement of the years I had carried her, the nights I had worked myself to exhaustion to fund her future, the sacrifices that had built the foundation of her life. Just blame, just rage. I read the letter once, folded it neatly, and placed it in the drawer of my desk. I did not respond. There was nothing left to say, because in that moment, everything became clear. I had not lost a family. I had never had one. What I had were dependents who saw me as a resource, a background figure, a sponsor. My years of labor had not earned me love or respect. They had purchased convenience. And when I withdrew that convenience, they revealed the truth. I was nothing to them except what I provided. Rachel moved through the house like a shadow. She did not scream at me, did not beg anymore. Perhaps she understood, finally, that her silence had betrayed me as much as her daughter's laughter. Perhaps she knew that something had snapped in me that would never heal. We spoke less and less, our words reduced to necessities. Dinner, bills, errands. The warmth that once lingered between us was gone, replaced by a cold, mutual recognition of failure. The girls stopped coming by. Their absence was a relief more than a loss. Haley returned to her friends, her life of shallow distractions. Emma disappeared into bitterness, her failed wedding a story she would twist to fit her own narrative of victimhood. Neither called, neither wrote again, and I felt no grief, only release. In the quiet that followed, I finally understood what had kept me bound all those years. It wasn't love. It was illusion. The illusion that if I gave enough, sacrificed enough, bent enough, they would one day see me for who I was. But illusions are fragile things. One laugh, one cruel sentence, and they shatter beyond repair. The house was quiet now, achingly quiet. No laughter, no arguments, no footsteps. Just silence. I sat in it, let it fill me, let it replace the years of noise and need. And for the first time in decades, I felt free. I hadn't lost a family. I had walked away from servitude. Now, when I think back on that dinner, on the sound of their laughter at my expense, I don't feel rage. I don't even feel sorrow. I feel clarity. They told me who I was to them. I believed them, and I acted accordingly. So the question remains, was I wrong? Was I cruel to finally draw the line, to stop being the background support for those who never valued me? Or was it the only way to reclaim myself after years of thankless devotion? You tell me, what would you have done?